we get to a comedy. This is the only other comedy up until the last comedy that we reviewed, which was The Invisible Woman, and now we actually get to, I guess, what's a real comedy, and that's Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Now, there has been several comedies. Actually, there's been comedy all the way through the set, but this is an actual comedy that was actually made for comedy.
Intentional comedy.
Exactly.
The thing about this movie is, I don't know what happened here. I think that all the moons and all the suns were just in perfect alignment when they made this film, because everything works in this film. Even though it shouldn't really work, you got monsters and you got Abbott and Costello, and neither one of those seems like a good combination, but it works, and it works perfectly in this film. This is, I'm going to say it, a perfect film.
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Abbott and Costello once again, because I haven't seen them since I was a small scientist in my lab late at night, and I used to watch them then. But I also watched the Three Stooges, which are my favorite, but Abbott and Costello were always a favorite legendary comedy duo of mine.
I always had this one going in the crypt when I was a kid. A young vampire, just a fledgling. Is that what young vampires are called? I don't know. But I've always loved this movie, and it's hilarious, and every performance is pitch perfect, and it's non-stop chuckles from beginning to end.
It is. It's sort of like The Invisible Woman, where it's just non-stop comedy. It just hits you over the head every 5 seconds. There's some sort of gag or some sort of joke or something going on, and it's funny. It's actually funny. Now, growing up, I also liked Abbott and Costello, but recently, now that I've been seeing Abbott and Costello films, they're not that good anymore. Just to say, I don't find them that funny. However, this is the film that was perfect. They were perfect in this movie, and like I said, everything got in alignment, and it was just an amazing, cool film to watch. Also, the monsters in this film, come on, we gotta give it up. Lon Chaney, once again, as a Wolfman, and Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Woo!
And then we had Glenn Strange return as the Frankenstein monster. And all of these monsters, they were just perfect. It was so nice to see Mr. Lugosi come back and play Dracula, because he hadn't been in any of these films since the first Dracula film.
I just think that every monster performance in this movie is just the perfect version, just pitch perfect for every single one of them. And also, I can say that when I was a young vampire and I used to watch this movie, this was my first exposure to all of these classic Universal monsters. This was my first exposure to the Wolfman and to Dracula and to Frankenstein. I had never seen them before I saw this movie. So these versions were always the ones that lived in my head before I saw all the other Universal movies. And I think that that's part of why I appreciate that this movie is so great and these versions of these characters are so perfect.
Yeah, I think this is, again, like you just said, the perfect versions of these characters. And what makes the movie so good is the characters play it straight. Dracula don't play it for laughs, and neither does the Wolfman. The Wolfman's as crazy as ever, and Glenn Strange, once again, knocks it out as Frankenstein's monster. He was so good in this film, and this is actually like the first film he actually got to do stuff. He talked, and he moved around, and he actually did things in this movie, and he was excellent as the Frankenstein's monster.
Yes, he had the perfect look, the perfect sound. I mean, he was very, very... He played the monster very, very well. And Lon Chaney coming back to play Lawrence Talbot, and actually he becomes friends with Abbott and Costello. It worked out so perfectly. That was so awesome. And just the writing there was just awesome to have him work with Abbott and Costello. And Abbott and Costello themselves basically did their routines. It's basically everything you see of Abbott and Costello in here is something that they would do normally as a comedy routine anyway. And they just worked it perfectly into the film.
Also, the comedy works, the creatures work because they're playing it straight, but also, we got a great story here. And it's kind of funny because it's a rehashed story from all the other Frankenstein movies, which is kind of funny because they want Lou Costello's brain inside the Frankenstein monster. So it's basically the same story that we've watched 100 times, a million times over already, but it works here, and it works really well.
And also, it's kind of the same, but the opposite of the story, because the reason they want Costello's brain is not because he's smart, or a scientist, or a great genius, it's because he's a dope, and then they'd be able to control the Frankenstein monster because they would put a gullible, easy to control brain in the monster's body.
Yeah, so there's also plenty of science in this movie as well. And Dracula gets to use it.
There is quite a lot of good science in this film. A lot of good science.
Science!
One of my favorite films, and I love this gag, and it never gets old, is when Costello was reading the legend of Dracula in the beginning of it, in the candles like moving on the coffin. And I just absolutely love that scene. I can watch it 100 times. It never gets old.
Chat!
This whole film just works, and it seems like it shouldn't work, but it's a loving tribute to all the monsters and, you know, the great comedy and a great story, and the effects were actually pretty good here too. Everything just came together for this film.
Yes, that was also one of my favorite routines in the entire film. And I remember watching that as a little boy, and then getting to see it once again here was a gem. I absolutely laughed my butt off. My scientific butt fell right off as I laughed at Lou Costello doing that routine. It was just freaking funny.
Yeah, I still think out of all the films they've done, this was the best they were ever together on film in any movie they've ever done.
I agree, and I definitely would have to say that this 100% gets a golden tombstone from me.
Absolutely. If you got the little goblins or the little ghouls there in your house, and you are able to turn this movie on and let them watch it, I mean, they might be a little bit afraid of the monsters, but it's still funny, and it's a great, great Halloween, great October film for everybody to watch and enjoy. This, of course, gets...
And I would also give it the golden tombstone. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I always have. I grew up watching these when I was a little boy, and to watch them now once again, all these years later, just an awesome movie, and I enjoyed it immensely.
So there you go. There is one of the greatest horror team-up comedies I think ever made, and a perfect film for October, like I said. Now, tonight, once again, Dave and Becky, you know the drill. We've been doing this for like 75 straight days now or something. I lost count. But they're going to be doing their live streaming tonight, live streaming video gaming. So if you are interested in horror games, you want to be spooked, tune in tonight and watch them live stream.
Yep, and make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell so that you know you get notifications of when they go live for the live streaming. And as always, stay spooky.